Two friends waited beneath one small umbrella during a hard rain. One had just lost his job and could barely speak. The other kept offering plans, contacts, and clever solutions. With every answer, his friend stepped farther into the rain. At last, the umbrella holder stopped talking and moved closer. For several quiet minutes, they simply watched the buses pass. Then the worried man whispered, "That is the first help I could carry today. Advice can point toward tomorrow, but presence gives someone enough ground to stand on now." Before offering a map, make sure someone has a place to stand. A young painter moved his ladder only one step each evening after work. His neighbors laughed because the blank walls still looked enormous. He never argued. He cleaned one brush, painted one narrow strip, and marked the next place before going home. On the seventh morning, sunlight revealed a finished mural across the whole building. A neighbor asked why he had never rushed. The painter smiled. "I only needed tomorrow's first step to be ready." Large work becomes lighter when each day leaves a clear beginning for the next. Consistency grows faster when tomorrow knows where to begin. A farmer measured his young oak against every taller tree in the field. Each week, he tied a new ribbon to show how far behind it remained. One windy night, several tall trees lost heavy branches, while the small oak stood unharmed. In spring, the farmer removed the ribbons. He finally noticed thick roots spreading beneath the soil. The oak had not been losing a race. It had been building what the ruler could not reach. Comparison counts visible height, but life often strengthens us first in places no one can measure. Do not call it slow growth when the roots are doing their work. A baker rang a brass bell whenever an order went wrong. The sharp sound warned everyone that angry words were coming next. One midnight, his apprentice burned the final loaf. The baker reached for the bell, but found a note tied to it: "Ring this only after the bread cools." He waited beside the oven. By morning, the mistake looked smaller, and the apprentice had already prepared fresh dough. The baker never removed the note. Anger demands an immediate audience, while wisdom is willing to speak after the heat has left the room. A delayed answer can prevent a lasting wound. A merchant kept one scale for buyers and another for himself. The first was slightly heavy, so customers always received less. The second was exact, because he hated being cheated. One day, his daughter switched the scales by mistake. By noon, every customer had received a little extra. Instead of losing money, the merchant saw old customers return with friends. He placed the honest scale in the center of the stall and threw the other away. Profit taken through unfairness may fill a drawer, but it quietly empties the doorway. The fairest measure often brings the longest line back. A woman found tiny pencil marks inside her father's old toolbox. She expected measurements for shelves and tables. Instead, each mark recorded a date she had visited home. Beside the shortest visits, he had drawn small stars. She remembered rushing through those afternoons, checking her phone while he made tea. The toolbox held no complaint, only proof that ordinary hours had mattered to him. She carried it home and began marking dates with her own children. Love is often counting the moments we are too busy to notice. Someone may be treasuring the hour you are trying to hurry through. Students barely noticed the cleaner who switched off the final hallway light each evening. They assumed his work began after learning ended. But he kept every abandoned practice page he found near the bins. Years later, the school held an exhibit of early sketches by a famous former student. One missing drawing completed the collection. The cleaner opened a flat box and handed it over, perfectly preserved. "I could see effort before it looked important," he said. The room applauded the artist, but that night, they also remembered the man who had noticed the beginning. Respect the people who recognize value before it receives a name. A traveler bought a postcard at every station but never wrote on one. He planned to send them when he found better words. Years later, while packing for another journey, he discovered the stack still blank. The people he meant to thank had moved, changed, or disappeared from his life. At the next station, he bought one plain card and wrote only, "I remembered your kindness today." He mailed it before boarding. Perfect words had delayed him for years, one honest sentence finally crossed the distance. A simple message sent today is worth more than perfect words kept forever. A neighbor borrowed the same garden chair every evening and always returned it after dark. Its owner smiled, though she had begun eating dinner while standing. One day, she placed a second chair by the gate and said, "This one is for borrowing. The other is where I rest." The neighbor looked embarrassed, then thanked her. Soon they sat together once a week, each in her own chair. Kindness did not end when a boundary appeared. It became clear enough to last without turning into quiet resentment. A healthy boundary does not close the heart, it gives kindness a place to rest. A student placed one blue dot on his calendar after every page he studied. His classmates filled their schedules with bold goals and long weekend sessions. His single dots looked almost foolish. Months later, exam week arrived. The others searched for time they no longer had, while his calendar had become a quiet blue field. He was not brilliant, and he had never studied all night. He had simply made progress too small to fear and too regular to ignore. The page was tiny, the pattern changed everything. Make the daily promise small enough to keep and steady enough to matter. A cliff path survived storms that broke the proud stone wall above it. A traveler asked the keeper why the path curved so low instead of climbing straight toward the view. The keeper pointed to grass pressed flat by the wind. "It reaches the same place," she said, "but it does not argue with every storm." They followed the winding route and arrived safely after sunset. A direct path can look brave, yet wisdom sometimes chooses the shape that can continue. Bending around pressure is not the same as abandoning the destination. You can change your route without changing what you stand for. A farmer added one more sack each time his cart reached the gate. One more trip saved, he told himself. The wheels groaned, but the harvest looked impressively high. Halfway to market, an axle snapped and the cart spilled everything into the mud. An older farmer helped him recover half the grain, then loaded only what the repaired wheel could carry. They reached the market late but safely. The farmer earned less that day and learned more. Excess often disguises itself as efficiency until the burden breaks what carries it. Enough protects the journey that more can quietly destroy. A king ordered his name carved into the largest stone of a new bridge. During the first flood, that decorated block loosened because workers had polished away its rough edges. A mason replaced it with a plain stone fitted deep between the others. The bridge held through the night. In the morning, the king asked where the mason's name should be carved. The mason touched the road and said, "If the crossing is safe, the stone has already been remembered." Useful work does not become smaller when no signature is visible. What holds others up needs no monument to prove its worth. Two neighbors stopped speaking after a basket vanished from a doorstep. Each believed the other had taken it, and every silence became new evidence. An old woman placed an empty cup between their doors. "Fill it with what you know," she said. Neither could add anything. Then she asked them to fill it with what they had assumed. They laughed despite themselves. That evening, a child returned the basket from the wrong house. Suspicion had built a wall from facts too small to fill a cup. Before judging a person, separate what you know from what fear supplied. A man changed lines whenever another one seemed faster at the morning bakery. Each time he moved, his old line advanced. Behind him, a woman stayed in the slowest line and greeted the tired cashier by name. When the man finally reached the counter, the bread he wanted was gone. The woman split her loaf and said, "I was not choosing the quickest line. I was choosing how to wait." He had measured every minute and missed every person. Efficiency can save time, but impatience can spend the peace it was meant to protect. A faster path is not always worth becoming restless along the way. Every morning, a boy turned an empty flower pot toward the light and gave it one spoon of water. His brother laughed. Nothing had appeared for weeks. One rainy day, the boy forgot, then ran home from the bus stop to move the pot away from the cold glass. Beneath the soil, a pale green curve had finally opened. His brother called it luck. The boy smiled because he knew how many quiet mornings luck had required. We often notice the first leaf and overlook the faithful care that made the soil ready. What looks sudden may be the result of care no one stayed to watch. A traveler knelt beside a mountain pond and tried to see the moon. Leaves covered the surface, so he swept them aside with a stick. The more he moved the water, the more the moon broke into silver pieces. An old guide sat beside him without speaking. Slowly, the ripples faded, the leaves drifted away, and the moon became whole. Did the sky change? The guide asked. The traveler shook his head. Some answers do not arrive through harder searching. They appear when we stop disturbing the place where they are reflected. Stillness does not create the answer, it lets you see what was already there. A carpenter blamed his apprentice when a new door would not close. He pointed at the uneven edge and demanded that it be cut again. The apprentice quietly measured the frame, then measured the floor. Overnight rain had swollen the old wood beneath the hinge. The door was straight. The room had shifted. The carpenter lowered his saw and apologized. From then on, he wrote one rule above the bench: measure the frame before cutting the door. When something goes wrong, anger often edits the nearest person before truth has finished the sentence. Check the frame before you cut down the person standing inside it. A wealthy tailor asked his assistant to sew a third hidden pocket inside every new coat he made for himself. One held coins, one held keys, and the last was for whatever he might gain next. Soon the coat sagged on one side and tore at the seam. His assistant repaired it, but left the third pocket out. "Where will I put more?" the tailor asked. She pointed to his free hand. That evening, he used it to carry bread home for his neighbors. A life packed only for keeping leaves no room for giving. Enough is the space that allows your hands to open again. A woman found one blank card in her mother's recipe box. Every other card held careful measurements, but this one was labeled only Sunday soup. She called her mother and asked why the recipe was missing. Her mother laughed. "That was the meal we made from whatever you brought to the kitchen." The woman had expected a secret ingredient. Instead, the recipe had always been their time together. That Sunday, she brought carrots, sat beside her mother, and wrote down the conversation instead of the soup. Some traditions cannot be preserved unless we are present while they are still alive. Do not wait for a memory to teach you what a living moment can explain. Sailors laughed at the old gatekeeper who raised a small flag each dawn, even when the harbor was empty. He checked the rope, studied the clouds, and practiced the same signal alone. Months later, a fishing boat returned through heavy fog with a broken radio. The captain saw one faint red shape moving above the wall and followed it home. At sunrise, the sailors asked how the gatekeeper had known they would need him. He said, "I did not know. That is why I stayed ready." Preparation often looks unnecessary until one ordinary habit becomes someone else's way home. Readiness is service offered before anyone knows how much it will matter. A traveler kept missing the same evening train while answering one more message for work. Each time, he bought another ticket and promised tomorrow would be different. One night, the station clerk closed the window and said the route would end that week. The traveler looked at the unused tickets in his pocket. They were not proof that he lacked time. They were proof of what he had repeatedly placed ahead of it. The next evening, he turned off his phone, boarded early, and watched the city disappear behind him. The train had always been waiting for a decision. Your priorities are written by what you keep choosing when the clock asks again. A gardener left her gate open because she wanted everyone to enjoy the flowers. Soon, visitors picked every bloom and stepped on the new shoots. She considered locking the garden forever. Instead, she opened it for one quiet hour each evening and placed a basket of cut flowers by the entrance. The garden recovered. Neighbors still received beauty, and some began helping her water. Generosity had not failed, it simply needed a shape that protected its source. Giving without limits can remove the very thing you hoped to keep sharing. Protecting the source of your kindness helps it remain kind.